The inheritance that changed everything. Ethan Reed was just an ordinary man living on Earth, working a boring desk job, and dreaming of something more exciting. But he never expected excitement to knock on his door in such a strange way. One evening, after coming home from work, he found a package waiting for him. It was old, dusty, and had no return address. When he opened it, there was a letter written in a neat but ancient handwriting. The letter read, "To Ethan Reed, the last of my bloodline. Inside this package is the key to your inheritance. Use it wisely, for it holds the power to change everything. The coordinates will lead you to what is rightfully yours. Be warned, others may seek it, but it is you who must decide its fate." Ethan frowned. He didn't know anyone in his family who could have sent this. Attached to the letter was a strange metallic key, unlike anything he had ever seen. It shimmered faintly under the light, glowing softly as if it were alive. Below the key there was a small device showing coordinates to a location far outside Earth's cities. Curiosity burned in Ethan's mind. He had no family left, at least none he knew of, and this inheritance seemed like a mystery waiting to be solved. After a restless night, he decided to follow the coordinates. The next morning, Ethan rented a small space cruiser and left the bustling cities behind. The coordinates led him to an abandoned facility hidden deep in a canyon. The place looked ancient, with rusted walls and vines creeping over its structure. A single door stood at the entrance, locked with a slot that perfectly matched the key Ethan had received. With a deep breath, Ethan slid the key into the slot. The door creaked open, revealing a dark chamber inside. As he stepped in, lights flickered on, and he saw a cryogenic pod in the center of the room. Inside the pod was a humanoid figure, tall, with pale blue skin and glowing golden eyes. The pod began to hum, and the glass cover slowly lifted. The figure inside opened its eyes, staring directly at Ethan. "Who are you?" the creature asked in a deep, raspy voice. Ethan froze. He had never seen an alien before, and now one was standing right in front of him, speaking his language. I'm Ethan. I think I inherited this place. What are you?" The alien stepped out of the pod, its movements slow but graceful. "I am Zoran, a prisoner of the Tsar Empire. For centuries, I have been their slave, locked here to guard a secret they wish no one to find." Ethan's heart raced. A secret? What kind of secret? Zoran looked at him with a mix of curiosity and caution. A weapon, one so powerful it could destroy entire civilizations, or unite them under one rule. The Tsar Empire feared its power, so they hid it here and left me as its guardian. But now, by unlocking this place, you have taken on a great responsibility. Ethan's mind spun. This was more than he had bargained for. "I didn't know. I didn't mean to." Before he could finish, Zoran grabbed his arm. "Listen to me carefully. By freeing me, you have marked yourself. The Tsar Empire will come for me. And when they find me, they will find you. We must leave this place now." Suddenly, a loud rumble echoed through the chamber. Ethan looked up, seeing dust falling from the ceiling. The sound of engines roared in the distance. Someone, or something, was approaching. "Too late," Zoran said, his voice filled with dread. "They've already found us." Ethan felt panic rising in his chest. "What do we do?" Zoran's eyes glowed brighter. "We fight, or we run. But either way, your life will never be the same again." As the sound of approaching ships grew louder, Zoran stepped forward, his figure radiating an aura of power. Ethan realized this wasn't just an alien. It was someone who had seen war, who had fought battles far beyond Earth's understanding. "Ethan Reed," Zoran said, turning to him, "you have inherited not just a place or a key. You have inherited a war, and now you must decide which side you are on." The chamber shook as the enemies drew closer. Ethan clenched his fists, his fear slowly giving way to determination. Whatever this inheritance was, he wasn't going to give it up without a fight. The part ends with Ethan and Zoran preparing for their first encounter with the enemies, the air thick with tension, and the unknown future looming ahead. First contact with danger. The chamber was silent, save for the faint hum of Zoran's breath and the distant vibrations growing louder by the second. Ethan stared at the alien, his heart pounding. "Who's coming?" Ethan demanded, gripping the strange metallic key in his hand as if it could somehow protect him. Zoran didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tilted his head, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Bounty hunters," he said finally, his voice sharp. "Hired by the Tsar Empire. They don't ask questions, and they don't take prisoners. They're here for me. And now, for you." Ethan's chest tightened. "Wait, why me? I didn't do anything." "You unlocked the door," Zoran said simply, pointing at the ancient mechanism Ethan had activated. "To them, that makes you a threat. But worse." Zoran's gaze fixed on Ethan, cold and calculating. "They'll assume you know about the weapon, even if you don't." Before Ethan could argue, the ground trembled violently. The chamber's walls shuddered, and a deep mechanical roar echoed outside. A sharp beam of light pierced through a crack in the ceiling, scanning the room like a searchlight. "They're here," Zoran muttered. He turned to Ethan, grabbing his arm. "Listen to me carefully. If you want to live, you follow my lead. No questions, no hesitation." Ethan tried to swallow his fear. Okay, what do we do?" Zoran's glowing eyes flicked to a corner of the chamber. "That tunnel." He pointed to a dark, narrow passage that Ethan hadn't noticed before. "It leads to a secondary exit, but we'll need a diversion." Before Ethan could ask what kind of diversion, Zoran placed his palm on a nearby console. The alien technology sprang to life, holographic symbols swirling around his hand. A low hum filled the room as Zoran began pressing buttons rapidly. "What are you doing?" Ethan whispered. Zoran didn't look up. "Overloading the chamber's power core. When it detonates, it will create enough interference to mask our escape. But it will also collapse this entire structure." Ethan's eyes widened. "You're blowing up the place. What if we don't make it out?" Zoran glanced at him with a faint smirk. "Then your inheritance ends here." Before Ethan could respond, a deafening crash shook the room. The door they had entered through was ripped open, and 3 towering figures stepped inside. They were covered in dark, spiked armor, their faces hidden behind angular helmets. Each carried a massive energy rifle, their movements precise and terrifyingly calm. "Zoran," one of them called out, their voice distorted and metallic. "You cannot run forever. Surrender, and we may consider mercy." Zoran stepped forward, raising his hands. "Mercy," he called back, his tone mocking. "The Tsar Empire doesn't know the meaning of the word." The lead bounty hunter raised their rifle. "Then die with your pet human." Before Ethan could react, Zoran moved faster than he thought possible. With a single leap, Zoran closed the distance between himself and the bounty hunters. He twisted the lead hunter's weapon out of their hands and used it to fire at the other 2. "Move, Ethan," Zoran shouted, his voice echoing in the chaos. Ethan snapped out of his daze and sprinted toward the tunnel. Behind him, Zoran fought with inhuman speed and precision, dodging laser blasts and striking with lethal force. The ground shook violently as the power core's overload began to escalate. Alarms blared, and the air grew thick with heat and dust. Ethan stumbled into the tunnel, glancing back just in time to see Zoran dispatch the last bounty hunter with a brutal strike. "Run," Zoran bellowed, diving into the tunnel after him. The 2 of them sprinted through the narrow passage as the chamber behind them collapsed in a thunderous explosion. The force of the blast propelled them forward, and Ethan felt himself tumbling onto hard ground as they emerged into the open air. The sky above was dark, filled with the silhouette of an enormous Har warship hovering ominously overhead. Ethan gasped for breath, his heart racing as he looked at Zoran. "That was insane," Ethan managed to say between gulps of air. Zoran dusted himself off, his expression grim. That was nothing. The warship above will send more, and they won't stop until they have what they came for. Ethan stared at the massive ship, his fear returning tenfold. So what do we do now? Zoran's eyes gleamed with determination. We take the fight to them. The part ends with Zoran and Ethan climbing into an old, battered escape ship hidden near the facility. As they prepare to leave, the warship above begins to deploy smaller attack craft, setting the stage for a high-stakes pursuit through the stars. Humanity's bold gamble. Ethan's hands trembled as he gripped the ship's control stick, his knuckles white against the smooth metal. The small craft they'd stolen barely held together as it zipped through the asteroid belt, Tar Empire fighters hot on their tail. Faster! Zoran barked from behind, his sharp golden eyes scanning the ship's display panels. I'm going as fast as this rust bucket will go. Ethan shot back, sweat dripping down his face. If you've got a better plan, now's the time. Zoran leaned forward, pressing a button on the console. A holographic map flickered to life, showing the nearby sector of space. He pointed to a faint signal emanating from a far-off system. There, Zoran said. A human outpost. We need to get there before they catch us. Ethan glanced at the map, disbelief in his eyes. That's Federation territory. We can't just show up unannounced. They'll arrest me, or worse, shoot us down. Zoran's expression hardened. If they're anything like you, I doubt they'll shoot first. And right now, we don't have a choice. A sharp alarm blared through the ship, cutting off their argument. Ethan's heart sank as he saw 3 red blips on the radar, enemy fighters closing in fast. They're locking onto us, Ethan shouted, panic rising in his chest. Zoran moved swiftly, his hands flying over the controls. Engage the asteroid field. They won't risk their shields in such tight spaces. You're insane, Ethan muttered but veered the ship into the dense cluster of floating rocks. The XR fighters followed, their sleek designs weaving through the maze of debris. Ethan's ship shook violently as smaller asteroids grazed the hull, but Zoran's calculations proved correct. The enemy fighters struggled to maneuver without colliding. Zoran smirked. Humans may be reckless, but you're not entirely hopeless. Before Ethan could respond, the ship broke free of the asteroid field, and the human outpost loomed ahead. It was a massive space station orbiting a barren planet, its outer hull gleaming with the blue glow of Earth's advanced technology. Ethan activated the comms. This is Ethan Reed, requesting emergency docking clearance. We're under attack. Static crackled before a stern voice replied. Unidentified vessel, you're entering restricted space. State your purpose or be fired upon. Ethan gritted his teeth. I'm a human citizen. I have vital information regarding a threat from the Tar Empire. I'm bringing a guest. There was a long pause. Then the voice replied, colder this time. You're bringing a what? Zoran leaned into the comms, his voice calm and commanding. I am Zoran, a former prisoner of the Tar Empire. I seek humanity's alliance against a common enemy. Deny us, and you doom yourselves. The line went silent again. Ethan held his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Finally, the voice returned, laced with suspicion. Dock at Bay 12. Any sign of hostility, and you'll be destroyed on sight. The docking bay doors opened, and Ethan guided the battered ship inside, the XR fighters retreating as the station's defense turrets activated. As the ship landed, armed guards surrounded the craft, their rifles aimed at the exit hatch. Ethan and Zoran stepped out slowly, their hands raised. The station commander, a stern woman with piercing gray eyes, approached them. You've got 30 seconds to explain why you brought an alien here. Zoran stepped forward, towering over the humans. I come bearing knowledge of a weapon that could change the fate of this galaxy. But first, we must survive the war that is coming. The Tar Empire will not stop until they have me, and the weapon. The commander narrowed her eyes. And why should humanity care about your war? Zoran gestured to the station around them. Because when the XR are done with me, they'll turn their sights on Earth. You are young, untested, but with my knowledge and your resources, humanity can rise to become a galactic power." The room fell silent. Ethan could see the doubt in the soldiers' faces, but also the flicker of curiosity. The commander finally spoke. "You're asking us to gamble everything on a promise from an alien. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't throw you both in a cell right now." Zoran stepped closer, his golden eyes burning with intensity. "Because if you don't, the Tsar Empire will tear this station apart within the week. I am your only chance to survive what's coming." Before the commander could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. A soldier shouted, "Ma'am, SAR ships detected on long-range scanners. They're heading straight for us." The commander turned to Zoran, her expression grim. "You'd better be worth the trouble, alien." Zoran smirked. "You'll see soon enough." The part ends with the station preparing for an imminent battle, Zoran and Ethan stepping into a war room filled with Earth's military leaders, ready to make humanity's bold move against the XR Empire. The Galactic Uprising. The air was thick with tension as Ethan stood in the shadow of towering alien warriors. The dimly lit cavern buzzed with whispered conversations in a dozen languages, each one alien to his ears. Around him, members of species he had only seen in textbooks and movies huddled together, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. At the center of the cavern, Zoran stood tall, his presence commanding. His voice echoed, rich and resolute. "For centuries, you've been under their heel. The Tsar Empire has stolen your freedom, your families, and your future. But today, that changes." Ethan shifted uneasily as murmurs rippled through the crowd. He leaned toward Zoran. "Are you sure about this? These people don't exactly look battle-ready." Zoran's glowing golden eyes met his. "Desperation makes warriors of us all." The cavern was a hidden resistance outpost, deep in the heart of an abandoned mining planet. Zoran had led Ethan there after their narrow escape from the Federation station, convinced that the key to defeating the Tsar Empire lay not in Earth's military, but in the oppressed species scattered across the galaxy. "Freedom comes at a cost," Zoran continued, his voice rising. "I've fought their wars, built their ships, and endured their whips. I know their weaknesses, their fears. But I cannot do this alone." A hulking reptilian alien stepped forward, his scales glinting in the faint light. His voice was deep and guttural. "And why should we trust you, Zoran? You were one of them once, a servant to the Tsar. How do we know you won't betray us the moment it suits you?" The crowd fell silent, all eyes on Zoran. Ethan held his breath, unsure how the alien would respond. Zoran stepped forward, peeling back the collar of his tunic to reveal a series of jagged scars running down his neck and chest. "These marks," he said, his voice steady but filled with pain, "are not the marks of loyalty. They are the marks of defiance. The XR tried to break me, just as they tried to break all of you. But they failed. And now, with your help, we will make them pay." The cavern erupted in cheers, the sound reverberating through the walls. Ethan felt a flicker of hope for the first time since this chaos began. But the moment was short-lived. A high-pitched alarm blared, cutting through the cheers like a knife. One of the resistance fighters, a wiry insectoid alien, scuttled forward, his multiple eyes darting nervously. "They found us. SAR scouts are approaching the perimeter." Panic spread through the crowd. Ethan's heart raced. "What do we do now?" he asked Zoran. Zoran's expression was calm, almost unnervingly so. "We fight. But first, we make them underestimate us." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" Zoran turned to the resistance fighters. "Let them think we're weak. Let them think we're running. And then we strike where it hurts most." The cavern erupted into organized chaos as Zoran barked orders. Fighters armed themselves with scavenged weapons, setting traps and fortifying choke points. Ethan was handed a plasma rifle, its weight unfamiliar and intimidating in his hands. The first wave of XR scouts entered the cavern minutes later, their sleek, insect-like armor reflecting the dim light. They moved with precision, their weapons scanning every shadow. Zoran stood at the center of the cavern, alone and unarmed, his hands raised in surrender. The scouts hesitated, their leader stepping forward. "You are outnumbered," the scout leader hissed. "Surrender, and perhaps the XR will spare you." Zoran smirked. Outnumbered? Perhaps, but not outmatched. At his signal, the resistance fighters unleashed their ambush. Hidden charges detonated, collapsing parts of the cavern and trapping the scouts in a crossfire. Ethan found himself firing wildly, the plasma rifle's recoil jolting his shoulder with every shot. The battle was chaotic and brutal, but the resistance fighters fought with a ferocity born of desperation. Within minutes, the scouts were overwhelmed, their lifeless bodies scattered across the cavern floor. Ethan stood amidst the aftermath, his chest heaving. "We won," he said, almost in disbelief. Zoran placed a hand on his shoulder. "This was just the beginning. The XR will send more. But tonight, we've shown them something they haven't seen in centuries: resistance." As the resistance fighters began to regroup, Zoran addressed them once more. "The XR think us broken. They think us weak. But together, we are stronger than they could ever imagine. Tonight, we rise. And tomorrow, we take back what's ours." The part ends with the resistance preparing for their next move, Zoran and Ethan standing at the edge of the cavern, staring out into the star-filled sky. For the first time, the galaxy feels within their grasp. But the weight of what's to come looms heavy. The hidden weapon. The planet was a graveyard, its surface a barren wasteland littered with the wreckage of ancient battles. Towering metal spires, once part of a thriving alien city, now jutted out like broken bones against the crimson sky. Ethan stood on the edge of a deep canyon, his breath catching as he looked down. "There's nothing here," he said, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. Zoran stepped beside him, his glowing eyes scanning the horizon. "Nothing you can see," he replied. "The Xar buried their secrets deep. The weapon lies beneath this canyon, hidden within the ruins of their first empire." Ethan glanced at him. "And you're sure it's still here? After all this time?" Zoran didn't answer. Instead, he raised a hand, pressing a small device embedded in his wrist. A faint hum filled the air, and the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Ethan stumbled backward as a section of the canyon floor split open, revealing a staircase carved from a shimmering black stone. The air around it crackled with energy, sending shivers down his spine. "Stay close," Zoran said, descending the stairs. Ethan hesitated, glancing back at the makeshift camp where the resistance fighters were setting up defenses. What if this is a trap? Zoran stopped, looking back at him. If it is, it's one worth risking. The XR fear this weapon for a reason. It could change everything. With a deep breath, Ethan followed. The stairs led into a massive underground chamber, its walls covered in glowing symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. At the center of the room stood a towering obelisk, its surface smooth and reflective. Zoran approached the obelisk, his movements cautious. "This is it," he said, placing a hand on its surface. The obelisk responded to his touch, glowing brighter as symbols began to shift and rearrange. "What does it do?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zoran didn't look at him. "It's not just a weapon. It's a rewriting device. It can alter genetic codes, transform entire species. In the right hands, it could unite the galaxy. In the wrong hands." He trailed off, his expression dark. Ethan frowned. Why would the Xar leave something like this behind? Zoran turned to him, his gaze piercing. Because even they feared it. But fear is a double-edged sword. They hid it, hoping no one would ever find it. But they also left it intact, in case they ever needed it. Before Ethan could respond, a distant rumble echoed through the chamber. The obelisk's glow dimmed, and Zoran's expression hardened. "They're here," he said, Ethan's stomach dropped. The XR. Zoran nodded. They must have tracked us. The two raced back up the stairs, emerging into the canyon just as a car warship descended from the sky. Its sleek, black hull reflected the dying light of the sun, and its engines roared like thunder. Resistance fighters scrambled into position, their weapons trained on the ship. Ethan grabbed a plasma rifle, his hand shaking as he joined them. "Hold the line," Zoran shouted, his voice carrying over the chaos. "We cannot let them take the weapon." The XR soldiers emerged from the ship, their dark armor gleaming as they advanced with precision. The air filled with the sound of energy blasts and the screams of battle. Ethan fired blindly, the recoil jolting his shoulder with every shot. Around him, resistance fighters fought with everything they had, but the XR soldiers were relentless. Amid the chaos, Zoran moved like a force of nature, his every strike calculated and devastating. He fought his way to Ethan's side, grabbing his arm. "We can't hold them off forever," Zoran said. "We need to activate the obelisk." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding. Together, they retreated back into the chamber, the sounds of battle echoing behind them. As they reached the obelisk, Zoran pressed his hand against its surface once more. Symbols rearranged themselves, and the room filled with a blinding light. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked, shielding his eyes. Zoran's voice was steady. "I'm setting it to release a pulse. It will disable their technology and give us a chance to escape." Ethan hesitated. "And what about the resistance fighters out there? What happens to them?" Zoran's expression faltered for the first time. "There will be casualties. But if we don't act now, there will be no resistance left." The part ends with Zoran activating the obelisk, the light intensifying until it engulfs the entire chamber. Outside, the XR warship and its soldiers falter as their technology shuts down, but the resistance fighters are left to face the aftermath of the devastating gamble. Humanity's ultimate test. The galaxy was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan stared out from the bridge of the stolen tar cruiser, the vast expanse of stars stretching before him. The obelisk's pulse had done its job, disabling the enemy's technology and crippling their warship, but it had done far more than anyone expected. The pulse had rippled across the galaxy, knocking out ships, satellites, and even entire planetary grids. Earth was now at the center of a galactic crisis, and for the first time, humanity was being watched by every major alien power. Ethan turned to Zoran, who stood silently at the helm. "You didn't tell me the pulse would spread this far." Zoran's glowing eyes narrowed. "It was necessary. The XR no longer hold the advantage. The galaxy is now on equal footing." Ethan clenched his fists. "Equal footing. We've thrown billions into chaos. Earth's leaders are demanding answers, and the resistance barely survived the last attack. How do you expect us to fight an empire with no fleet, no allies, and no plan?" Zoran stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "The XR Empire thrives on fear and control. By breaking their technological grip, we've given the galaxy something it hasn't had in centuries: hope. Now, we must unite them before the XR rebuild." Ethan shook his head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "You're asking humanity to lead a coalition of alien species that barely trust us. How do you expect that to work?" Zoran smirked faintly. "Humans are unpredictable, stubborn, and reckless. That's exactly why it will work." Before Ethan could argue further, an incoming transmission crackled over the comms. A hologram flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Admiral Devereux, the head of Earth's defense fleet. "Ethan Reed," the Admiral said, her tone cold. "You've put Earth in the crosshairs of a galactic war. Explain yourself." Ethan swallowed hard. "Admiral, we didn't have a choice. The Tar Empire was coming for us, whether we liked it or not. The pulse was the only way to level the playing field." Devereux's eyes narrowed. "And now the entire galaxy is in chaos. Earth's colonies are vulnerable, our allies are pulling back, and the XR are regrouping faster than we anticipated. You've left us with a mess, Reed. Zoran stepped into view, his towering presence filling the screen. Admiral Devereux, humanity stands at a crossroads. You can choose to retreat, to isolate yourselves, and hope the XR pass you by. Or you can step forward, lead the resistance, and show the galaxy that humanity is a force to be reckoned with. Devereux raised an eyebrow. And you think humanity can lead a fractured galaxy against the XR? Zoran's eyes glowed brighter. Not alone. But with the weapons secrets and the alliance we're building, we have a chance. Together, we can stop them. The Admiral's hologram flickered as she considered his words. You're asking a lot, alien. But I'll give you this much. Earth will provide resources and troops, for now. Don't make me regret this. The transmission ended, leaving the room in silence. Ethan let out a shaky breath. That went better than expected. Zoran turned to him, his expression unreadable. It's a start, but the real test is yet to come. The next day, Zoran and Ethan met with the leaders of the resistance. The cavernous meeting hall aboard the cruiser was filled with representatives of dozens of alien species, their expressions ranging from cautious optimism to outright hostility. A reptilian elder rose first, his voice hissing with skepticism. Humans are young and unproven. Why should we trust them to lead us? Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Because we have nothing to lose. Humanity doesn't have centuries of history in the stars. We don't have massive fleets or advanced technology. But we do have something that Tar didn't account for. The will to survive. The room fell silent as Ethan continued. I'm not asking for blind trust. I'm asking for a chance. A chance to stand together. To fight for something bigger than ourselves. Because if we don't, the XR will pick us off one by one. Zoran watched as murmurs spread through the crowd. Slowly, the elder nodded, and others began to voice their agreement. It was the beginning of something new. But the triumph was short-lived. As the newly formed alliance prepared for their first coordinated strike against the XR, an urgent alert echoed through the cruiser. Zoran and Ethan rushed to the bridge, where a resistance scout delivered grim news. The Tar Empire isn't retreating, the scout said, his voice trembling. They've unleashed a fleet unlike anything we've ever seen, and they're heading straight for Earth. Ethan's heart sank as he stared at the holographic display showing the fleet's trajectory. How long do we have? The scout hesitated. 2 days, maybe less. The part ends with Zoran turning to Ethan, his expression resolute. This is humanity's moment. If we win, the galaxy will follow. If we lose, there will be no second chance. A new galactic order. The XR fleet loomed over Earth like a dark storm, its sheer size blotting out the stars. From the surface, humanity watched in stunned silence as the largest armada ever seen crept closer, its intentions unmistakable. Ethan stood in the command center of the Allied flagship, surrounded by holographic displays showing the chaotic battle preparations. Alien generals and human admirals barked orders, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of tension and urgency. Zoran stood beside him, calm amidst the storm. This is it, he said. The moment we prove that Tar are not invincible. Ethan swallowed hard, his hands trembling as he tightened his grip on the weapon's activation key. The obelisk power now coursed through the fleet, integrated into their systems thanks to Zoran's guidance. It was a gamble, one that could either disable the Tar's fleet entirely or destroy their fragile alliance if it failed. What if it doesn't work? Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. Zoran glanced at him, his golden eyes glowing faintly. It will work. But even if it doesn't, you must act like it will. Leadership is belief, Ethan. Believe in yourself, and they will follow. Before Ethan could respond, an alert blared through the ship. The XR fleet had deployed its first wave, a swarm of sleek fighters descending toward Earth's atmosphere. The command room fell silent as Admiral Devereux's voice cut through the comms. All units, this is it. Earth stands or falls today. Give them everything you've got. The battle for Earth. The Allied fleet surged forward, a chaotic mix of human and alien ships darting through the void. Plasma cannons and energy beams lit up the darkness, painting the battle in bursts of light and fire. Ethan watched from the flagship's observation deck, his heart pounding as the battle unfolded. The XR fighters moved with precision, their formations cutting through the Allied ships like blades. "We're losing too many," Zoran said, his voice tense. "The obelisk needs to be activated now." Ethan hesitated, staring at the activation key in his hand. "What if it hits us too? What if we—" "There is no time for doubt," Zoran interrupted, his voice sharp. "Trust the alliance you've built. Trust yourself." Ethan took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the key. He stepped to the central console and inserted it, the obelisk's power surging through the ship. The entire fleet shuddered as the energy pulse rippled outward. The XR fighters faltered mid-flight, their systems flickering and failing. Allied ships surged forward, exploiting the momentary chaos. Cheers erupted across the comms as the tide of battle began to turn. But the victory was short-lived. A massive XR dreadnought emerged from the shadows of the fleet, its sheer size dwarfing everything around it. Unlike the smaller ships, its systems seemed unaffected by the pulse. Ethan's heart sank as the dreadnought unleashed a devastating volley, tearing through Allied ships with terrifying precision. "It's shielded," Zoran said, his voice grim. "The pulse wasn't strong enough to penetrate its defenses. What do we do?" Ethan asked, panic creeping into his voice. Zoran stepped forward, his expression resolute. "We take it down ourselves." The final stand. Ethan and Zoran boarded a stealth ship, their destination clear, the dreadnought's central reactor. The plan was simple in theory: sneak aboard, disable the reactor, and escape before the ship's destruction. In practice, it was a near-suicidal mission. The stealth ship darted through the chaos of battle, weaving between debris and enemy fire. Zoran piloted with precision, his focus unshakable. They breached the dreadnought's hangar, slipping past its defenses unnoticed. The halls were eerily quiet, the faint hum of the ship's systems the only sound. "Stay close," Zoran said, leading the way. As they approached the reactor, alarms blared, and XR soldiers poured into the corridors. Zoran fought with the ferocity of a warrior who had nothing left to lose, his movements fluid and devastating. Ethan followed, his plasma rifle shaking in his hands as he fired at anything that moved. They reached the reactor chamber, a massive glowing core pulsating with energy. "This is it," Zoran said, placing a series of charges around the reactor. "Once this goes, so does the ship." Ethan glanced at the countdown on the charges. "And what about us?" Zoran looked at him, a faint smile crossing his lips. "You'll make it." Ethan frowned. "What about you?" Before Zoran could answer, a massive XR soldier burst into the room, its weapon aimed directly at Ethan. Zoran lunged, tackling the soldier and grappling with it as the countdown ticked down. "Go!" Zoran shouted. Ethan hesitated, his heart wrenching as he watched Zoran fight. "I'm not leaving you." Zoran turned to him, his voice calm despite the chaos. "You must. Humanity needs you more than it needs me." Ethan's chest tightened, but he forced himself to move, sprinting back toward the stealth ship as the charges detonated. The reactor erupted in a blinding explosion, and the dreadnought began to collapse. Ethan's ship shot out of the hangar just as the dreadnought exploded, the force of the blast propelling him into the void. A new beginning. Back on Earth, the Allied forces celebrated their victory. That XR fleet had been defeated, their empire fractured. Humanity had proven itself not just as survivors, but as leaders. But for Ethan, the victory was bittersweet. He stood on a hill overlooking the rebuilt resistance camp, holding the activation key in his hand. Zoran's words echoed in his mind. Leadership is belief. As the first human-led galactic council convened, Ethan took his place among the leaders of the Alliance. The galaxy was still fractured, but for the first time, there was hope. The part ends with Ethan staring at the stars, his resolve clear. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning.